Thank you very much, Dr. Fayadh, and thank you to ISRM for the invitation. To be honest, it's a pleasure to join such a distinguished panel. Also, I extend my regards to my fellows in this panel. So back to your question, Dr. Fayadh. What I would like to say is, rather than discussing resilient cities from engineering or urban planning perspective, I would use my own experience and background. So I would really offer a complementary perspective from environmental and sustainability point of view. What I can say is city resilience begins, as you mentioned earlier, begins long before disaster occurs. It begins with considering the health of the surrounding environment, including the air, water, soil, and the whole ecosystem. So my point of view is that simply a city is considered as a strong, resilient city not by only having great buildings or modern technology or large bridges, etc. As you mentioned, Dr. Fayad, earlier, city resilience is that a city can be considered resilient that when it considers environmental risks and also protect the public health and look for a quick recovery from any disaster or from any disruption. This is, to be honest, particularly important in our health areas, especially in this, which is considered as we can say arid or semi-arid regions, where urban resilience must address not only flood storms, infrastructure failure, but also consider one of the most important topics, which is water scarcity, which is also we also extremely experience long dust storms, long heat waves, and also we are considering land degradation and desertification. All these are hot topics to be considered when we consider the city resilience. So when we talk about future shocks, we should not only think about sudden disasters such as floods or power outage. We also should consider what we call slow-moving shocks. And what I mean by slow-moving shocks is, for example, extreme temperatures and extended heat waves, such as happening in Europe in the long droughts and long summers. Also, declining the groundwater levels, worsening air quality, land degradation, and loss of vegetation. All these examples are considered as indicators for environmental risks, which can also be considered as I say, slow moving shocks. So these risks may develop gradually over many years or even decades. However, they can weaken a city until relatively a small disruption can create a major crisis. So from my point of view, I would summarize the pillars of sustainable resilience into three main fundamental building blocks. As we can say it. The first building block is understanding the interconnected risks. One of the main weakness in conventional planning is that risks are often assessed separately. So, for example, when we consider extreme heat, this is not only a climate issue. It should lead or it will lead to several consequences, such as high electricity demand, which can also create pressures on the cooling system. Also, it create pressure on water consumption and also worsening the air quality from using too many engines or too many generators or too many air conditioning instruments. The health risks for the outdoor workers. This creates great pressure on hospitals when they get sick or they get sunburn or something. So this was the first pillar. The second pillar, what we can consider moving beyond the historical data. Many cities are still planned mainly according to past climate patterns and past events. However, under climate change, population growth and rapid and urban expansion, the past data is no longer always a reliable guide for the future. Therefore, cities need to use climate projections. Also, they should have future scenarios, environmental modeling. They should use technologies such as remote sensing and satellite imagery. Also, integrating the artificial intelligence AI in early warning systems. For example, for instance, the digital twins, etc. These technologies do not really eliminate the risk, but they can significantly improve the decision-making process before the crisis occurs. Last but not the least, the third pillar, what I consider is the nature, considering nature as an infrastructure. When people hear the term infrastructure, they immediately start thinking of roads, bridges, hospitals, water networks, etc. These are built infrastructure, but when we say natural infrastructure should be considered as a asset and as a really natural infrastructure. I will give you a few examples. So, for example, for instance, valleys and the natural drainage channels, soils, the wetlands, the vegetations, all these are natural infrastructure. So for a valley is not an empty land waiting for development. A soil is not a surface to be covered with concrete and just continue building expanding the city. The valley is the natural food management system. Similarly, soil absorbs water, reduce the heat, support vegetation, and also plays a crucial role in carbon storage and carbon sequestration. So when cities remove these natural systems, they often have to replace their function later on through a very expensive engineering solutions. Therefore, what we can say in summary, before building a new infrastructure, cities should avoid destroying the natural infrastructure they already have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saad. That's amazing. David, I'll pass it on to you to put some of your comments on this question.
Dr. Said, thank you for that. I mean, as an overarching review of where we are and what we need to discuss, I think it was first class. There's a number of points which I picked up on, just some things that you said. First of all, I agree with you absolutely that one of the things that we've done is we've seen cities in terms of engineering rather than ecology or biology. You know, they are living dynamic organisms that breathe, that
Exactly.
expand, that grow, that
Exactly.
get sick, that recover, that adapt, all of those sorts of things. And I think one of the significant changes we've seen in recent years is this understanding of the city as an organic organism rather than as an engineering system. Um, and of course, that defines how we respond to it, because you can't just design and control an organic system. You have to develop it and grow it. There's the second thing which you said, which absolutely hit with me, was the idea that we have to see cities and the issues around them in terms of interconnected problems. We have to have a holistic
Exactly.
understanding of it. And one of the
Exactly.
reasons that I established the ISRM in 2018, 2019 was because when I look at and this was then, of course, before COVID and before many of the frameworks we're looking at now. But when I hear people talk about this, policymakers, OECD, World Bank, World Health Organization, KPMG, Deloitte, governments, whoever it might be, the language they use seems to be a simplistic and a linear, almost analog language, which doesn't fit with the hyper complexity of the world we're living in. It doesn't do it. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do in the ISRM, and I think one of the things that we're trying to do as a global community, is first of all to find a language that captures the complexity and the challenges that we're facing.
Exactly.
And it is not, and we have to invent a new language. It's very much like trying to use a typewriter as a metaphor for the internet. There's a species jump. It doesn't capture it. So you spoke about your pillars. We have three pillars. In the ISRM, we have three pillars that we engage with this. And the first is complexity, that these are complex issues, complex problems, complex systems, complex challenges, complex cascading consequences, etc., etc., complex networks. The second is, as you also referred to, is unprecedentedness, that we cannot model the current or future threats and risks based on extrapolation from historical data. If we looked at, for example, the 2021 Houston, Texas snowstorms, the snowstorms were not particularly bad. Certainly, if you come from Sweden or Ukraine, they're not bad. Even if you come from Milwaukee, they're not bad. The problem was not the snowstorm. The problem was the snowstorms in Houston, Texas. And of course, that was not almost on their risk register because they thought that doesn't happen to us. There is nowhere in the world now that can say this doesn't happen to us, whether it's heat, whether it's drought, whether it's fire, whether it's pollution, whether it's water, whether it is environmental degradation, and of course, we haven't even spoken about malicious attack, which is another whole thing there. For example, you talk about water dependency, and of course, malicious attack now becomes a very real strategic risk. But in those terms, we can't just do that based on historical extrapolation. We are in a new reality. So the first is complexity, second is unprecedentedness. And the third pillar is non-recoverability, that we're moving into a new reality. It's not that we survive and we recover back to what was, but we have to live in a new reality. And the example for us in the UK is 40-degree heat. Europe is not designed for 40-degree heat. We just cannot run Europe at that heat. And yet that is the new reality. So that is in terms of conceptual terms, that's how we do it. In terms of city management, I was very lucky from 2013 to 2015. I was on the academic advisory group for London resilience. So after London 2012 Olympics, looking at how we can create that legacy and create London as what was called a risk-sensitive, crisis-ready city. And the truth of the matter is, it's not about doing something new. It's about integrating what is already there. It's about creating the frameworks where knowledge can be shared, where partnerships can be developed. And there's a missing bit that is always there, and that is the people, the population. The population is seen as almost as an irrelevance. That is, you don't have to think about that. And when we talk about resilience and resilient cities now, it is always about all of society resilience, whole of society resilience. We have to have the people in there. It's not that easy to define, but it's a good as an idea, as a leitmotif, as an idea that we're running towards an objective. I think it's very, very good. I think one of the things that we, as a community of knowledge holders, of experienced practitioners, people who can influence policy, need to do, and the responsibility we need to accept, is that as a community, as a global community, we are, and I'm sure that's the same in Saudi, we are really, really good at creating outputs, reports, reviews, committees, inquiries. What we're not good at is outcomes, creating change. That's not, we're not so good at. And I think that what we need to do is accept the responsibility that anything that we put on the table as a suggestion of how we engage with this has to accept the responsibility of, and this is the change we want to make. And in my experience, it is actually very difficult, if not impossible, as an outsider, to either engage with or connect with or influence national policy. We're beginning to do that. But if you said to me, David, can we have national policy in Venezuela? It's almost impossible. But in Caracas, in the city, yes, there are people in the city that you and me could get in contact with in 3 days and have a dialogue with. So for me, the change is at city level. That is where the interesting stuff is happening, is at city level. Because cities are dealing with this not as a conceptual construct, but as the reality of how do we manage the buses today. How do we know? How do we do this? And it seems to me that that is where the influence can be had. That's where the change management can be had. So I am actually quite positive and optimistic about our ability to do stuff on one condition: we stop doing stupid stuff. The problem is that's not so easy. It's not so easy. And we keep doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
We right now we have an inquiry going on in the UK because there's a housing group that wants to build 250 houses in a floodplain.
Mm.
But if you build houses and they say, no, we can control it. We can build mitigation. No, you can't. Don't lie to me. You cannot. And in 3 years, that'll be flooded out. And then so we have to understand, we have to take what we call a grown-up conversation. We have to have a grown-up conversation. But if we can, I think we can make difference. And I was inspired by something that Bill Gates said last year, at the end of last year. And they were asking him, do you feel good? Because you have the Bill Gates Foundation, he's involved in this. They said, are you feeling very confident? And he was saying, I'm actually a lot more confident than I used to be. Why? He says, because I realize that the change is not in the boardroom, the change is in the community. And if you plant trees and have shade, if you build a pond and have water, and then you get the local children involved and the school involved and the community involved, he says, I'm actually much more optimistic because I've suddenly realized that is where you can make more change with $250 in an Indian village than you could do with 2.5 million from a government level policy thing, which has no meaning. So I think that we as a community are really moving towards an understanding of how we need to do this and how we can do this, but it has to be at empowering and enabling communities to take ownership. And then we can support that. Because what you can do at community level, you can actually bring change in within a 12-month cycle. You can bring change, you can demonstrate change. Whereas at government policy, it's always impossible to do that in a 12-month cycle. You're not talking about 3 year, 5 year, 7 year. So rather than the specificity of the problems, just in general of how we approach that, how we engage with that as a conceptual construct, as action-orientated policy, I think we're not far away. And the final point I'll make is when we had the global lockdown at the beginning of COVID in March 2020, when the world went into lockdown, within 4 days, the planet started healing itself. Pollution over China disappeared. Pollution over the Himalayas disappeared. The water quality in the Ganges increased. We saw butterflies coming back. We saw grassing. Really, the planet wants to be healthy. If we just stop poisoning it and destroying it, we can actually have victories pretty quickly. I think but it's human greed and stupidity. And Dr. Saad, if you have a solution to human greed and stupidity, I would really like to hear it because although it's an easy thing to say, it's not an easy thing to get going through the systems. So again, thank you for your
Yes.
contribution and your support, Fayadh. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. My
Back to you.
pleasure.